I was standing in 6 inches of freezing water in my garage when I realized the Pinehurst Commons Homeowners Association had just declared war on me without even knowing it. My name is William Fischer, and I had lived in this suburban Colorado neighborhood just outside Denver for 3 years without incident. The house was a modest 2-story with a decent yard, and I had kept my lawn pristine, my trash cans hidden, and my exterior paint approved by the HOA. I was the model homeowner, or so I thought. But in March of 2025, everything changed when the association decided they needed to build what they called a decorative retaining wall along the communal greenway that ran behind my property and 5 others. The wall was supposed to be purely aesthetic, according to the notice I received. It would enhance property values and create a more cohesive look for the neighborhood. The letter was signed by Patricia Henderson, the HOA president, and included architectural drawings that meant absolutely nothing to me at the time. I signed the approval form like everyone else because fighting the HOA over a wall seemed like a waste of energy. I had no idea that signature would lead to the biggest legal battle of my life. Construction started in late March, right as the snow was beginning to melt. The crew showed up one Monday morning with equipment, concrete blocks, and what seemed like a complete disregard for basic drainage engineering. I worked from home as a software developer, so I watched them through my office window as they built the wall higher and higher, creating what essentially became a dam along the natural slope of the land. The greenway had always served as a natural drainage channel for snowmelt and rainwater. The land sloped gently from the communal area down toward the street, with my property sitting right in the middle of that natural flow. Any competent engineer would have installed drainage pipes or weep holes in the wall to allow water to pass through. Instead, the HOA's contractor built a solid concrete barrier that redirected all that water straight toward my house. I noticed the problem during the first warm week in April. Colorado springs are unpredictable, and we got 3 days of 60-degree weather that melted the remaining snowpack rapidly. I was in my home office when I heard a strange rushing sound. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but when I looked out my back window, I saw a stream of water flowing down the side of my house like a creek. I ran outside, and my boots immediately sank into saturated ground. The entire back half of my yard was underwater, and the flow was coming directly from the wall. The water had nowhere to go except toward my foundation, and it was pooling against the house with increasing pressure. I spent the next 4 hours frantically digging trenches with a shovel, trying to redirect the water away from my home. That evening, after the sun went down and the melting stopped, I went into my garage to assess the damage. The floor was covered in water, and several boxes of stored items were completely soaked. My tools had been sitting in water for hours. I checked the basement and found moisture seeping through the foundation walls. This was a disaster, and it had only been 1 day of snowmelt. The next morning, I called Patricia Henderson directly. Her voicemail greeting was chipper and professional, asking me to leave a detailed message and she would get back to me within 24 to 48 hours. I explained the flooding situation as calmly as I could and asked her to call me back immediately. She did not. 2 days passed. The weather stayed warm and the flooding continued. I had set up a sump pump in my garage and was running it constantly, but I was fighting a losing battle against the volume of water. My basement walls were developing water stains, and I could smell mildew starting to grow. I called Patricia 3 more times and sent 2 emails. Nothing. Finally, on the 4th day, I received a response. It was not a phone call, but a brief email from Patricia that read, "Mr. Fischer, the wall was built to HOA specifications and approved by the community. If you are experiencing drainage issues, they are likely due to your property's grading, not the wall. You may need to hire a landscaper to address your yard's drainage at your own expense. Best regards, Patricia Henderson, HOA President." I read that email 5 times, each reading making me angrier than the last. The audacity of blaming my property's grading when their wall had fundamentally altered the water flow was breathtaking. My house had never flooded before. The drainage had been fine for 3 years, and presumably for however long before I bought the place. This was entirely the wall's fault. I decided to document everything. I took dozens of photos and videos showing the water flowing from the wall area toward my house. I measured the depth of the pooling water. I photographed the damage in my garage and basement. Then, I sent all of it to Patricia with a detailed email explaining that the wall had created a drainage problem that did not exist before and that the HOA needed to install proper drainage immediately. Her response came the next day. As previously stated, this is not an HOA issue. Please cease contacting me about your property's drainage problems. If you continue to harass HOA leadership, we will consider it a violation of community conduct rules. That was when I knew I needed a lawyer. I spent the weekend researching attorneys in the Denver area who specialized in property law and HOA disputes. I found a firm called Morrison & Associates that had an impressive track record of taking on homeowners associations. Their website featured several case studies of homeowners who had won significant settlements against overreaching HOAs. Monday morning, I called and spoke with a paralegal named Jennifer who listened to my story and scheduled me for a consultation with one of their senior partners, David Morrison, for that same afternoon. I gathered all my documentation, photos, videos, and the email correspondence with Patricia and drove to their office in downtown Denver. David Morrison was in his late 50s with silver hair and the calm, confident demeanor of someone who had been in a lot of courtrooms and won. He listened to my entire story without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he asked to see all my documentation. He spent 20 minutes reviewing everything while I sat there nervously. Finally, he looked up at me and said, "William, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of HOA negligence I have seen in years. They built a structure that fundamentally altered the natural drainage pattern of the area without conducting any kind of environmental impact study or drainage analysis. Colorado law is very clear about this. Property owners have the right to natural water drainage, and you cannot alter that flow in a way that damages neighboring properties." "So what can we do?" I asked. "We are going to send them a demand letter outlining the damage, the cause, and our demands for remediation and compensation. We will give them 10 business days to respond. If they refuse or ignore us, we file a lawsuit. Based on what you have shown me, I would estimate the damages to your property, including foundation repair, mold remediation, lost property, and the cost of installing proper drainage, could easily be in the six-figure range." "Six figures?" I repeated. My house had only cost me $280,000. The idea that the HOA could owe me $100,000 or more seemed insane. "Absolutely," David said. "Foundation damage is expensive to repair properly. Mold remediation requires specialists. You have lost property. And frankly, they created this problem through negligence, so they are liable for fixing it completely. Plus, we will include costs for my services, which they will also have to pay if we win, which we will." I hired him on the spot. We spent another hour going over the details and strategy. David explained that he would need to bring in a civil engineer to document the drainage problem and provide expert testimony. He also recommended I hire a foundation specialist to assess the damage to my home's structure. All of this would be documented and included in the demand letter and potential lawsuit. Over the next week, I coordinated with the experts David recommended. The civil engineer, a man named Robert Chen, came out and spent an entire day surveying my property, the wall, and the water flow patterns. He took measurements, soil samples, and used some kind of laser equipment to map the elevation changes. 3 days later, he provided a 30-page report that concluded, in technical terms, that the wall had created an impermeable barrier that redirected approximately 80% of the greenway's natural drainage directly toward my property, and that this was causing significant water accumulation and structural risk. The foundation specialist, a woman named Margaret Torres, was equally thorough. She used moisture meters, thermal imaging, and some kind of ground-penetrating radar to assess the damage. Her report was even more alarming. The constant water pressure against my foundation had created multiple small cracks that were allowing water infiltration. If left unaddressed, these cracks would worsen and could lead to serious structural failure within a few years. Her estimated repair cost was $48,000, and that did not include the mold remediation or interior repairs. Armed with these reports, David drafted the demand letter. It was 12 pages long and absolutely devastating. It outlined the timeline of events, the HOA's negligence in building the wall without drainage provisions, the specific damage to my property, the expert opinions, and the total damages claimed, $167,000. This included property repairs, lost belongings, temporary housing costs while repairs were made, and David's legal fees. The letter demanded the HOA immediately install proper drainage in the wall, pay for all damages, and respond within 10 business days. David sent the letter via certified mail, email, and regular mail to ensure there was no question the HOA received it. We sent copies to Patricia Henderson, the HOA's registered agent, and the property management company that administered the HOA. The response came faster than expected. 4 days after we sent the letter, I received a phone call from a man named Gregory Marsh, who identified himself as the HOA's attorney. His tone was dismissive and condescending from the start. "Mr. Fischer, I have reviewed your attorney's letter, and frankly, it is baseless. The HOA built a wall on common property, which is well within our rights. Your property's drainage issues are not our responsibility. We will not be paying you a dime, and if you proceed with legal action, we will countersue for harassment and frivolous litigation." I had expected resistance, but the outright hostility surprised me. "The wall blocked the natural drainage," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have engineering reports that prove it." "I am sure you paid someone to write a report that says what you want it to say," Gregory said, "but that does not make it true. The HOA followed all proper procedures. This conversation is over. Do not contact me or my clients again except through proper legal channels." He hung up before I could respond. I immediately called David and relayed the conversation. "Perfect," David said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "They are being unreasonable and hostile. That plays beautifully for us. I will file the lawsuit tomorrow. Make sure you continue documenting all water damage. Take photos every day. Keep receipts for your pump electricity costs, everything." True to his word, David filed the lawsuit the next day in Denver County District Court. The suit named the Pinehurst Commons Homeowners Association, Patricia Henderson in her capacity as president, and the property management company as defendants. It sought $167,000 in damages plus punitive damages for gross negligence. The filing made the local news. A reporter from a Denver community newspaper somehow got wind of the case and wrote an article titled "Homeowner Sues HOA Over Flooding Caused by Decorative Wall." The article was fair and accurate, outlining the basic facts of the case. It included a quote from David about property rights and one from Gregory Marsh denying all responsibility. The article also mentioned that several other homeowners along the Greenway had reported minor flooding issues but had not yet taken legal action. That article changed everything. Within a week of publication, 3 of my neighbors contacted me. They were the other homeowners whose properties backed up to the wall, and they had all experienced some level of flooding, though none as severe as mine. We met at my house one evening, and I showed them the engineering reports and explained the lawsuit. One of them, a retired teacher named George, was particularly angry. "I noticed the water in my yard, but I thought it was just a heavy snowmelt year. I had no idea the wall was causing it. This is unacceptable." Another neighbor, a young couple named Tim and Rachel, mentioned they had been planning to refinish their basement, but had discovered moisture problems and put the project on hold. They had assumed it was an old house issue, not realizing it was new damage from the wall. I gave them David's contact information, and all 3 ended up joining the lawsuit as additional plaintiffs. With multiple homeowners making the same claim, the case became much stronger. David amended the filing to include all 4 of us, and the damages increased to just over $400,000. The HOA's response was to dig in harder. At the next monthly HOA meeting, which I attended along with the other plaintiffs, Patricia Henderson addressed the lawsuit directly. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was mostly used for the occasional garage sale or holiday party. About 30 homeowners showed up, which was a decent turnout for a neighborhood of 150 homes. Patricia stood at a folding table at the front of the room, flanked by 2 other board members, a man named Craig and a woman named Susan. Patricia was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, aggressively styled blonde hair, and the pinched expression of someone perpetually annoyed. "Fess, as many of you know," Patricia began, her voice tight, "several residents have filed a frivolous lawsuit against this association regarding the new retaining wall. I want to assure everyone that this lawsuit is completely without merit. The wall was built properly, to code, and on association property. These homeowners are simply trying to extort money from the community." I stood up. "That is completely untrue," I said loudly. "The wall blocks natural drainage and has flooded multiple properties. We have engineering reports proving it." Patricia's face flushed red. "You are out of order, Mr. Fischer. Sit down." "I will not sit down," I said. "You are lying to these people. The wall is causing real damage to real homes, and the HOA is liable." "Security!" Patricia called out, even though there was no security. Craig, the board member, stood up awkwardly as if he might try to physically remove me, but several other homeowners started talking at once, and the meeting dissolved into chaos. One homeowner, an older woman I did not know, stood up and said, "I want to see these engineering reports. If the wall's causing problems, we need to fix it, not fight about it in court." Another man said, "How much is this lawsuit going to cost the association? Our dues are already high enough." Patricia tried to regain control. "The lawsuit will cost nothing because our insurance will cover it and we will win. This is a clear case of homeowners trying to blame the association for their own property problems." David had warned me this would happen. HO is almost never admitted fault, especially not publicly. They would fight to the bitter end and use community dues to fund their legal defense, even when they were clearly wrong. It was maddening. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. The board refused to even consider installing drainage in the wall, and they made it clear they would fight the lawsuit aggressively. As everyone filed out, several homeowners approached me privately and expressed support. A few mentioned they were glad someone was finally standing up to Patricia, who apparently had a reputation for being difficult and authoritarian. Over the next few months, the lawsuit moved through the discovery phase. David subpoenaed all the HOA's records related to the wall's construction, including contracts, architectural plans, and communications. What we found was damning. The wall had been Patricia's pet project. She had pushed for it over the objections of one board member who had questioned whether a drainage study was needed. Patricia had dismissed those concerns and hired the cheapest contractor she could find, a company called Summit Building Solutions that had a questionable track record. The architectural plans they used were generic templates, not custom designs for our specific property. No engineer had reviewed the plans, no drainage analysis had been conducted. The HOA had simply decided they wanted a wall, hired someone to build it, and assumed everything would be fine. Even worse, we discovered that the property management company had recommended hiring an engineer to review the plans before construction. Patricia had vetoed that recommendation to save money. There was an email chain where she explicitly stated, "We do not need to waste money on an engineer for a simple retaining wall." David was thrilled with this discovery. "This is negligence bordering on recklessness," he told me during one of our strategy meetings. She had multiple opportunities to do this right and chose not to for the sake of saving a few $1,000s. Now, it is going to cost them hundreds of thousands. The HOA's insurance company got involved around this time. They sent their own engineer to evaluate the wall and the drainage situation. To the HOA's dismay, their engineer reached the same conclusion as ours. The wall was improperly designed and was causing water to accumulate on our properties in a way that constituted property damage. The insurance company's attorney contacted David and proposed a settlement. The HOA would install proper drainage in the wall and pay each plaintiff $50,000 for damages and legal fees. It was a lowball offer, and David recommended we reject it. The actual damages were much higher, and we had a strong case to get full compensation. We rejected the offer, and the case moved toward trial. A court date was set for September 2025, about 5 months away. In the meantime, the flooding continued with every rain and snowmelt cycle. My sump pump ran almost constantly. I had to move everything out of my garage and basement to prevent further damage. The stress was enormous, and I was sleeping poorly, constantly worried about my foundation collapsing. In June, things took a dramatic turn. A massive rainstorm hit Denver, dropping nearly 4 inches of rain in 24 hours. The greenway behind my house turned into a raging river, and the wall created a massive pooling effect. Water backed up so high that it started flowing over the top of the wall, cascading down like a waterfall directly onto my property and my neighbors' properties. My entire backyard became a lake. The water was 8 inches deep in some places, and it was flowing into my house faster than the sump pump could handle. I called the fire department, worried about structural collapse. They came out and helped me sandbag around the house, but there was only so much they could do. The firefighter in charge, a calm woman named Lieutenant Anderson, documented everything and filed a report stating that the flooding was caused by an improperly designed retaining wall that blocked natural drainage. That fire department report became a critical piece of evidence. It was an independent official assessment from a government agency, stating exactly what we had been arguing all along. David immediately filed it with the court and sent a copy to the HOA's attorney. The insurance company came back with a new offer, $100,000 per plaintiff, plus installation of proper drainage. It was closer, but still not enough to cover all the damages. David countered with $150,000 per plaintiff, plus drainage, and after 2 weeks of negotiation, the insurance company agreed. But Patricia Henderson refused to accept the settlement. In a shocking move, she convinced the other board members to reject the insurance company's recommendation and continue fighting. The insurance company was furious. They sent a letter stating that if the HOA rejected a reasonable settlement against their advice, the insurance company might not cover any damages beyond the settlement amount if we won at trial. This was insane. Patricia was gambling with the association's money and, by extension, every homeowner's money, because she refused to admit she had made a mistake. The other homeowners started to realize what was happening, and there was growing anger at the board meetings. In July, a group of homeowners organized a recall petition to remove Patricia and the other board members. They needed 20% of homeowners to sign the petition to trigger a recall election. They got 40%. The recall election was scheduled for August. Patricia was defiant. She sent out a mass email to all homeowners claiming that the recall was being organized by troublemakers and malcontents who wanted to destroy the neighborhood. She accused me and the other plaintiffs of being the ringleaders, which was false. We were not involved in the recall effort at all, though we certainly supported it. The recall election was held on a Saturday in early August at the clubhouse. The turnout was massive, with over 70% of homeowners voting. Patricia and the 2 board members who supported her were removed by a vote of 82 to 43. 3 new board members were elected, including George, one of the plaintiffs in our lawsuit. The new board's first action was to accept the settlement. They met with the insurance company and David, and within 2 weeks, the deal was finalized. Each of the 4 plaintiffs would receive $150,000. The HOA would install proper drainage in the wall, including multiple drainage pipes and a French drain system to redirect water safely. All work would be completed by a reputable engineering firm, not the original contractor. The checks arrived in September. $150,000 felt surreal after months of stress and fighting. But it was not really a windfall. $48,000 went to repairing my foundation. Another $12,000 went to mold remediation. I spent $8,000 replacing damaged items and another $6,000 on the sump pump system I had installed to protect against future flooding. David's fees, which were paid separately by the insurance company, were another $30,000. Still, I ended up with about $76,000 after all expenses, and my house was repaired and protected. The drainage work on the wall was completed by October. The engineering firm installed 6 large drainage pipes through the wall at strategic points, along with a comprehensive French drain system that collected water and directed it to storm drains. After the first heavy rain following the installation, I watched nervously from my window. The water flowed through the pipes exactly as designed. My yard stayed dry. Patricia Henderson was not done, though. Even after being removed from the board, she continued to cause problems. She started a campaign to sue the new board members for accepting the settlement, claiming they had wasted association money, She sent threatening emails and hired her own attorney to explore legal options. The new board eventually filed a restraining order against her for harassment, which was granted by the court. In November, the situation reached a bizarre climax. Patricia, apparently unable to let go of her anger, vandalized the new drainage system. A neighbor's security camera caught her late one night pouring concrete mix into two of the drainage pipes, attempting to clog them. The new board president reported it to the police, and Patricia was arrested for criminal mischief and trespassing. I watched the arrest from my window. 2 police officers arrived at her house, which was on the other side of the neighborhood, and led her out in handcuffs. She was screaming about injustice and corruption, but the evidence was clear. The security footage showed her face clearly. She had done it. Patricia was charged with criminal mischief, a Class 2 misdemeanor in Colorado because the damage was under $1,000. She pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal and was sentenced to 6 months probation, a fine, and community service. She was also ordered to pay for repairs to the drainage pipes she had damaged. The whole saga finally ended in December 2025. The Pinehurst Commons Homeowners Association was under new management, the drainage was working properly, my house was repaired, and Patricia Henderson was gone. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she and her husband were selling their house and moving to Arizona, which was fine with everyone. I spent Christmas that year feeling genuinely grateful. My house was safe, my property values had not tanked, and I had enough money left over from the settlement to finally renovate my kitchen, something I had been putting off for years. More importantly, I had learned a valuable lesson about standing up for myself and not backing down when I was right. The experience changed how I viewed homeowners associations. I attended every board meeting after that, and I encouraged other homeowners to do the same. Transparency and accountability were the only ways to prevent another Patricia Henderson from taking control and making disastrous decisions that affected everyone. The new board was remarkably competent. They hired a reputable property management company, conducted regular maintenance inspections, and actually listened to homeowner concerns. They commissioned an engineering study of the entire neighborhood to identify any other potential drainage or infrastructure issues before they became problems. It was refreshing to see an HOA function the way it was supposed to, as a tool to maintain and improve the community rather than as a petty fiefdom for power-hungry board members. In January 2026, I ran into George at the grocery store. He had become the new HOA president and was doing an excellent job. We talked about how much had changed in less than a year. "You know, William," he said, "if you had not fought back and filed that lawsuit, none of this would have happened. Patricia would still be running things, the drainage would still be broken, and our homes would still be flooding. You did the whole neighborhood a favor." I appreciated the sentiment, but the truth was that I had just been trying to protect my own property. The larger changes were a bonus. Still, it felt good to know that something positive had come from all that stress and conflict. By March 2026, a full year after the wall was built, everything had settled into a new normal. The neighborhood was thriving under the new board leadership. Property values were stable. The greenway behind my house, with its properly engineered retaining wall and drainage system, looked better than ever. And my house, with its repaired foundation and renovated kitchen, felt like home again. I still thought about the whole experience sometimes, especially when it rained or when the spring snowmelt began. I would watch the water flowing safely through the drainage pipes and feel a mixture of relief and residual anger. Relief that everything had worked out, and anger that it had required a lawsuit, a recall election, and criminal charges to get there. David Morrison and I stayed in touch. He sent me a holiday card that year with a handwritten note thanking me for trusting him with the case. He mentioned that he had used the case as an example in a presentation to other attorneys about HOA negligence and the importance of proper engineering in community construction projects. Our case, he said, was now cited in Colorado legal circles as a cautionary tale about the dangers of cutting corners on infrastructure. That made me smile. If our struggle could help other homeowners avoid similar problems, then maybe all the stress and sleepless nights had been worth it. Knowledge spreads, and the more people understood their rights and the responsibilities of HOAs, the better protected they would be. The final chapter of the story came in April 2026, when I received a letter from Patricia Henderson's attorney. For a moment, I felt a surge of anxiety, worried that she was trying to sue me for something. But when I opened it, I found something unexpected: an apology letter. It was brief and clearly written by her lawyer, probably as part of her probation requirements, but it was an apology nonetheless. She acknowledged that the wall had been built improperly, that she had handled the situation badly, and that her actions had caused real harm to me and the other affected homeowners. She apologized for the vandalism and for her behavior throughout the entire ordeal. I read the letter twice, trying to gauge its sincerity. It was hard to tell. The language was formal and stilted, the kind of thing you write when a lawyer or judge tells you that you have to. But regardless of whether Patricia truly felt sorry or was just going through the motions, the apology marked an official end to the conflict. I filed the letter away and decided not to respond. There was nothing to say. The damage was done, the repairs were made, and everyone had moved on. Dwelling on it further served no purpose. Life returned to normal rhythms after that. I focused on my work, enjoyed my renovated kitchen, and participated in neighborhood activities with a newfound appreciation for community. The Pinehurst Commons turned out to be a pretty great place to live once the leadership changed and common sense prevailed. In May 2026, almost 14 months after the wall was first built, the neighborhood held a spring party in the Greenway area. It was the new board's idea, a way to bring everyone together and celebrate the community. They set up picnic tables, grills, and a bounce house for the kids. Nearly 100 people showed up, which was incredible turnout. I stood near the retaining wall, watching the party unfold. Kids ran around laughing, neighbors caught up with each other, and someone had set up a volleyball net. The wall, with its proper drainage system, stood quietly in the background, doing its job without causing any problems. It looked nice, actually. The decorative stones and landscaping achieved the aesthetic goal Patricia had originally wanted, but now it was functional too. George walked over with a plate of burgers and handed me one. "Hard to believe this is the same wall that caused all that trouble," he said, gesturing with his burger. "Engineering matters," I said. "Details matter." "They really do," he agreed. "And accountability matters. If people had not been willing to hold Patricia accountable, we would still be dealing with floods and fighting." We stood there eating our burgers and watching the party. It was a perfect spring day, warm but not too hot, with a clear blue sky that stretched forever. The kind of day that makes you glad to be alive and living in Colorado. A young family I did not recognize approached me. The husband extended his hand and introduced himself as Marcus. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "We bought our house here 3 months ago, and when we were doing our due diligence, we learned about everything that happened with the wall and the lawsuit. The fact that you fought for what was right and that the neighborhood dealt with the bad leadership honestly made us want to live here. It showed integrity." I shook his hand, genuinely touched. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. I think you will like it here. Things are pretty good now." His wife, whose name was Sarah, smiled. "We already love it. Everyone has been so welcoming." They wandered off to join the party, and I watched them go, feeling something I had not felt in a long time: genuine pride in my community. Not just my house or my property, but the whole neighborhood. We had been through something difficult together and come out better for it. As the sun started to set and the party wound down, I helped clean up. We folded tables, packed up leftover food, and made sure all the trash was collected. It was the kind of simple community work that felt meaningful in a way that was hard to articulate. Everyone pitching in, taking care of shared spaces, looking out for each other. Walking back to my house that evening, I took the long way around the Greenway just to enjoy the weather. The retaining wall was barely visible in the fading light, a shadow among the trees and landscaping. It was just a wall now, not a symbol of conflict or negligence, just a piece of functional infrastructure doing its job. Inside my house, I poured a glass of water and sat in my kitchen, admiring the new countertops and cabinets I had installed with the settlement money. The kitchen had turned out beautifully, exactly what I had envisioned: modern but warm, functional but stylish. Every time I looked at it, I was reminded that sometimes fighting for what is right leads to unexpected benefits. My phone buzzed with a text from David Morrison. He sent a photo of a certificate he had received from the Colorado Bar Association recognizing his work on property rights cases. Our case was mentioned specifically as an example of effective legal advocacy. I texted back my congratulations, genuinely happy for him. He had done excellent work and deserved the recognition. I thought about how different things might have been if I had just accepted Patricia's initial response, if I had believed her when she said the flooding was my problem and not the HOA's. I would still be fighting floods, my foundation would be crumbling, and my property value would be tanking. Instead, I had stood up for myself, hired a good attorney, and fought for the truth. It had been stressful and expensive and time-consuming, but it had been worth it. The experience had taught me important lessons about documentation, persistence, and the value of expert opinions. When you are right, you have to be willing to prove it with evidence and expertise. Emotions and arguments only go so far. Hard data, engineering reports, and legal knowledge win cases. It also taught me about community dynamics and the importance of good governance. An HOA is only as good as its leadership, and when leadership fails, homeowners have to be willing to step up and make changes. The recall election that removed Patricia was just as important as the lawsuit itself. Both were necessary to fix the systemic problems. Over the following weeks, life continued its pleasant routine. I worked on my software projects, maintained my lawn to HOA standards that were now reasonable and fairly enforced, and enjoyed my repaired, flood-free home. The spring rains came, and I watched with satisfaction as the water drained properly, flowing through the pipes exactly as engineered. No flooding, no pooling, no stress. In June, the HOA board announced they were establishing a reserve fund for major infrastructure projects and would require engineering studies for any construction work on common property. It was exactly the kind of policy that should have been in place from the beginning. The new rules were codified in updated HOA bylaws that all homeowners voted to approve. I attended the meeting where the vote took place and raised my hand in favor. It passed unanimously, which felt like a final vindication. Everyone now understood the importance of doing things right the first time, even if it cost a bit more up front. The expensive lesson had been learned. By the time summer arrived in full force, the whole saga felt like ancient history. New families moved into the neighborhood, unaware of the drama that had unfolded just over a year earlier. The wall was just part of the landscape, unremarkable and uncontroversial, the way it should have been from the start. I was grilling dinner in my backyard one evening in July when my neighbor Tim came over with a six-pack of beer. We had become friends through the whole lawsuit experience, bonded by shared stress and eventual victory. He handed me a beer, and we clinked bottles. "Can you believe it has been over a year since this whole thing started?" he asked. "Barely," I said. "Feels like a lifetime ago and also like yesterday." "Rachel and I finally finished our basement," he said. "No more moisture problems. Everything is dry and solid. We have got a whole entertainment room down there now. You should come over and see it." "I would love to," I said. "How much did the settlement cover for you guys?" "Almost everything," he said. "We spent about $90,000 on repairs and waterproofing, had maybe $60,000 left over, used some of it for the basement renovation, and put the rest in savings. Honestly, it worked out better than we could have hoped, considering how bad it could have been." We stood there drinking our beers and watching the sunset behind the mountains. The view was spectacular, one of the reasons I had bought the house in the first place. The foothills glowed gold and purple in the fading light, and the air smelled like pine and summer grass. "You know what the craziest part is?" Tim said. "If Patricia had just installed the drainage when you first asked, it would have cost the HOA maybe $10,000. Instead, she fought it, and it ended up costing them $600,000 when you add up all 4 settlements plus the drainage work they eventually had to do anyway." "Pride is expensive," I said, "and stupidity is even more expensive." We laughed, but it was true. The whole disaster could have been avoided so easily. A basic engineering consultation before building the wall would have identified the drainage issue. Installing proper drainage during construction would have been simple and cheap. Or even after I first complained, acknowledging the problem and fixing it would have saved everyone time, money, and stress. Instead, Patricia's refusal to admit a mistake had cascaded into a massive legal and financial disaster. As summer turned to fall, I found myself thinking less and less about the whole experience. It became just another story, something that had happened and was now resolved. The emotional weight of it faded, replaced by the simple satisfaction of living in a well-maintained home in a well-managed community. In September, almost 18 months after the wall was first built, I got a call from a reporter at a Denver news station. She was doing a story about HOA disputes and had heard about our case. She wanted to interview me for a segment about homeowner rights. I agreed, and the interview was filmed in front of the retaining wall. I explained what had happened, showed the drainage pipes, and talked about the importance of standing up for yourself when an HOA is in the wrong. The reporter asked good questions, and the segment aired a week later during the evening news. The response was significant. I got emails and calls from other homeowners in different neighborhoods who were dealing with similar issues. Some were fighting over improper construction, others over unfair fines or rules. I shared David Morrison's contact information with everyone who asked and encouraged them to document everything and seek legal help if needed. It felt good to help others avoid the mistakes I had made, or to encourage them to fight battles I had already won. Knowledge and experience are only valuable if you share them, and I was happy to be a resource for people facing similar struggles. By the end of 2026, nearly 2 years after the whole thing started, I had fully moved on emotionally. The lawsuit, the flooding, the recall election, Patricia's arrest, all of it was just history. My house was worth more than I'd paid for it, the neighborhood was thriving, and I was content. I spent New Year's Eve at a neighborhood party at the clubhouse. The new board had organized it, and it was a great event with food, drinks, and live music from a local band. At midnight, as everyone counted down and cheered, I looked around at my neighbors and friends and felt genuinely lucky. The next morning, January 1st, I woke up early and made coffee in my beautiful kitchen. I sat at the counter, looking out the window at my dry, properly drained backyard, and reflected on everything that had happened. The journey from discovering water in my garage to receiving a 6-figure settlement had been long and stressful, but it had also been empowering. I had learned that systems are only as good as the people running them, that documentation and evidence are crucial when fighting for your rights, and that persistence pays off when you are in the right. I had learned that communities can heal and improve when people are willing to hold leaders accountable. And I had learned that a good attorney is worth every penny when you are facing a legal battle. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own judgment. When I first saw the water flooding my garage, I knew something was wrong. When Patricia told me it was my problem, I knew she was lying. When the HOA refused to take responsibility, I knew they were wrong. And I had the courage to stand up and fight for the truth, even when it would have been easier to give up. That courage, that willingness to fight for what was right, had made all the difference. It had protected my property, improved my community, and set an example for others facing similar struggles. The 6-figure settlement was nice, but the real victory was knowing that justice had been served and that negligence had consequences. As winter settled in and the snow began to fall, I watched from my window as the flakes accumulated on the ground. The drainage system worked perfectly, melting snow flowing through the pipes and away from the properties. Everything functioned exactly as it should have from the beginning. I finished my coffee and started my day, ready for whatever came next, confident that I could handle it. The HOA had built a wall that flooded my property, and I had fought back and won. That experience had changed me, made me stronger and more aware of my rights and responsibilities as a homeowner and community member. The story had a happy ending, but it was an ending I had to fight for. No one gave it to me. I had to document the damage, hire experts, find a great attorney, and see the legal battle through to the end. I had to encourage my neighbors to join the fight and support the recall election that changed our leadership. I had to be willing to stand up in meetings and call out lies and demand accountability. All of that was hard and uncomfortable and stressful, but it was also necessary and ultimately rewarding. The fight was worth it, not just for the money, but for the principle. For the idea that homeowners deserve to be treated fairly, that HOAs have responsibilities as well as powers, and that negligence should have consequences. As I sat there in my kitchen on that first morning of the new year, I felt a deep sense of peace and satisfaction. My home was safe, my community was healthy, and justice had been served. The wall that had once threatened to destroy my property now stood as a monument to the power of standing up for what is right, properly engineered and functioning exactly as it should. That was all I had ever wanted, and through persistence, courage, and the help of skilled professionals, I had achieved it. The battle was over, the victory was complete, and life was good. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to myself, to David Morrison, to the new HOA board, and to everyone who had supported the fight for accountability and justice. The wall stood outside, its drainage pipes flowing clear, a testament to what happens when you refuse to accept injustice and fight for the truth. My attorney had indeed sent them a 6-figure bill, and they had paid it, along with every lesson that came with it.